Hello, everyone. Good evening. I trust we've had a wonderful day today. It's really good that even at the end of the day's activities, at the end of work, as it were, we can actually come together and look into a topic and share our thoughts on it. So this evening, we are going to continue on our discussion on conversation AI with Box Framework Composer. Now, as Chisomaga highlighted, the last time we talked about it, we were able to go we're able to look into entities, we're able to look into how the bot framework composer interface is, on how to have a general overview of Microsoft bot framework, and we looked into language understanding, as it were. So right now we are just going to be taking it further, and we are going to delve into other aspects of the application, and we are going to see how a fully functioning bot can actually look like in the back end. So right now, we're just going to begin. All right, so we're just going to start with our brain teaser. So just similarly to what we did last week, we were all fantastic last week. And I realized that our questions were actually too cheap. So let us see. This is our first brain teaser. I don't mind the brain teaser too that is written up there. So does anyone have the answer to this? In what sport is the car parked? I'm going to be counting down from 10. 10. Anyone?
Okay, wait, let's finish the countdown, then we can go through the answers.
Okay, in that case, let me count down from 5. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Time up. Yeah, so.
Okay, we have two responses. One from Taiwo Odunade, he says 87, and Oluwaseun says 88. Steven says 87. Yeah, me, I don't know. I'm not even going to.
All right. So that's beautiful. This is a very intelligent group. The answer is 87. And you might wonder, how does the answer come up? Well, if you take the image and turn it upside down, you will see it's just a count from 86 to 87 to 88 to 89
wow.
to 90 to 91. So that's a very beautiful answer. Well done. Okay, then the next one. It didn't update. Okay, so let's go ahead. So my name is Kayode Ajayi, and I'm a Power Platform / Azure AI developer with Ha-Shem. I'm an MCT, a certified Power Platform app maker and functional consultant. I love AI, and I'm very interested in mixed reality, virtual reality, game development, and 3D animation. And this is my LinkedIn profile. You can just search for Niger Tech Mentor. And on Instagram, Twitter, you can find me at _ Kayode Ajayi. All right, so going straight into it today, our agenda, we have 3 agendas similarly to last week. Today, we're going to start by looking at the building blocks of conversation AI. Then after that, we are going to look into the principles of bot design, right? Because when you're doing something, it's always good you understand the principles, because it's going to influence the actions and the decisions you take. All right, so we're going to look into the principles. Then thirdly, we are going to have an overview of adaptive cards. What are adaptive cards? How are they relevant when it comes to the whole idea of creating bots, chatbots, and applications generally? So let's just dive straight into it by looking at the building blocks of conversation AI. All right, so this is just an offshoot of what we said last week, because we had a similar headline to this last week. And now talking about the building blocks of conversation AI, one of the foundations is language understanding, right? Because language understanding allows you to understand the user's intention, as well as extract meaningful information from what the user said. All right, because when we're talking of conversation AI, it is an interaction. And language understanding really brings that into play. And I mentioned that in the area of cognitive services, well, Microsoft has two services: the Q&A maker, which allows you to have this FAQ style question and answers. Then we now have language understanding, LUIS, language understanding and intelligence service, which is really what we are using in this application. Then we now have dialogue flow. So dialogue flow represents how the bot decides what it needs to do next. Okay, when you are engaging in a conversation with somebody, depending on what the person says or does not say, depending on the intent of the conversation, you choose to say different things, you choose to do different things. Dialogue flow is really how you make that possible. Then another key building block is language generation. And language generation, it tells you of how the bot generates contextual and meaningful responses to send back to the user. Then the final building block, which is important, is memory. Generally, when you're building applications, you need to be able to store things in variables. You need to be able to persist information. And the memory component really makes that possible. So what are the principles of bot design? So let's firstly understand what are the factors that don't guarantee a bot's success. How smart the bot is. So what this really means is no one really cares how complex your bot is internally. If you feel your focus is just on making the bot smart, and you primarily focus on that, at the end of the day, you might be losing key components of the user experience, because really what a user wants is to have a goal, to have an intent, and he wants to be able to perform it on your platform. So you don't necessarily need to have a smart bot for it to be a usable bot or for it to be a successful bot. Another factor that doesn't guarantee a bot success is how much language the bot supports. So generally, averagely, people might not be able to speak more than 3 different languages, right? So you making your bot support different languages and all of those things, they are good efforts, but they don't guarantee a bot success. So what are the factors that guarantee a bot success? We now start to talk about how it solves the user problem. So when the user has an intention, when the user has a need to come in contact with your bot, how does it solve the problem? Then does the bot easily solve the problem of the user's problem? Does it solve the problem with the minimum number of steps? So generally in a conversation, you would want to make the conversation as brief. When you're thinking of user engagement, you might feel that, well, the more you give the user to do on your platform will actually make the user engage more. But really, that's not how it works. Usually, when a user can achieve his goal with the minimum amount of steps, it really helps them. It really makes it easy for them to come back, because they know it's not a service that is going to stress them. So when you are creating your dialogues and all of those things, you need to put that into mind. Then the next point here is, does the bot run on devices and platforms the user cares about? Right? So you don't want to create a solution that is restrictive or that cannot reach the user. So that's really where that comes in. Is the bot discoverable? Do the users naturally know what to do when using it? So similarly to when you're creating applications, because really a bot is an application, and based on the answer to the questions last week, I was able to explain that a bot generally is deployed in Azure with the app service. So it's just called a bot service, but under the hood is actually the app service. So a bot is an app. You can see a bot as an app. So generally, the design guidelines that are required when creating an app, they are also required when creating a bot. So now that's just like the general principle of bot design that you really need to have in mind when you are creating your bot. So I talked about adaptive cards. What are adaptive cards? Adaptive cards are an open exchange format enabling developers to exchange UI content in a common and consistent way. Adaptive cards is a very powerful solution, and really, what adaptive card brings to play, it brings cross-platform and more accessibility to your application. So adaptive card is not restricted to bot creation. Actually, adaptive card can be embedded anywhere. It can be embedded in a website. It can be embedded in an app. It can be embedded in a bot. Because adaptive cards are ways that you can design a UI. You can exchange UI content. You can design UI just by writing JSON. So you are not really going into the intricacies of creating the UI with C# or with any other programming language. But really, what you're just doing is you're creating a simple JSON object, and that will be rendered natively in a host application, automatically adapting to the look and feel of the host. That is another very interesting aspect of adaptive cards. Now, if I create an adaptive card and I deploy it in Microsoft Teams, for example, what it's going to do is that it's going to transform itself to blend with the Teams environment. If I take an adaptive card and I embed it in a Facebook chat, it's going to adopt the theme it's going to adopt the style of the host. So you can see it's like more like a chameleon. Anywhere it is, it takes the shape and the feel of the host. Then the goals of adaptive cards is they are portable. You can embed it on any app. It can work on any device, and it's just a UI framework. So you're not describing the style, as we are going to see, because adaptive card is one way that you can actually make your bots more interesting to work with, right? So it gives you a simple UI framework that you can just work with. Then adaptive cards is open. It is an open source software. Now you see, generally Microsoft is tending to a whole lot of open source things, and adaptive cards is just one of it. It's open source, and its libraries, the schemas, everything is open and shared. And one good thing about open
Hello, Kayode.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, I think we lost you for a few seconds.
Yeah, sorry, my internet. So now, generally, when you're talking about open source, not only the builder, so for example, if it's created by Microsoft, not only Microsoft is contributing to it, that just tells you that to it, and it ends up making the application very versatile. Then it is expressive. It's targeted at content developers, really, and it is declarative. So you don't need to write code in as it were. You just need to declare what you want to be present, and it styles itself. Okay, and that's the final point, which says it is automatically styled to the host application's UX and bright
Hello. Okay.
and brand guidelines. Okay, so right about now, just leveraging on the capabilities. Okay, so this is just an adaptive card. Now you can see this adaptive cards are showing the same they're showing the same data, but you can see based on the application, based on the device, they are being rendered in a different format. So that's really what we get by using adaptive cards. So right about now, we'll just go into the demo. Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can, but we lost you there for a few seconds.
Okay.
But you can go ahead.
I hope you can hear me now.
Yes, we can.
Okay. All right, so now we're just going to go into the demo and we'll look at how we can how these things are put together to actually have a functioning bot. So let me just let me share my desktop. I really should have done that from the onset. Okay, I hope you can see my screen.
Yes, we can.
All right. So now this is the bot framework composer. And if you remember, I showed us the emulator. So these are the two programs that we are really going to be interacting a lot. The bot framework composer is where you determine how the bot is structured, the dialogue flow, and all of those things. And the emulator is where you get to test your bot. All right, and the composer, you can also publish your bots from there. You can publish your bots from there. All right, so first off, let me show us something that I put together, and we are going to be using that as a baseline for what we are going to be talking about today. So this is, now first off, let's talk about the case scenario. The case scenario is a travel agency, right? I know I talked a lot about travel the last time. So it's a travel agency, and the goal, what they really want is they want to create a bot, they want to create a chatbot that can engage with their users while their users are on a journey. So for example, let's say GIG Motors, right? They have a chatbot, and while you are on your journey, you have access to the chatbot, and you can easily access some fun things that could just keep you busy or keep you entertained. It's just a platform for you to get information, basically, for you to be able to reach all of these things. So that's the case scenario. Depending on what you are building, you can always engineer your flow to adapt to that. But this was just something that I thought was fun, and something that we can look into together very easily. Okay, so let's just run through the application. So let me just come here and say restart conversation. So anytime you rerun it from the bot composer, you will see it here, and you just have to come here and say restart conversation. Okay, so it starts with a greeting, and it says, "Hello there, my name is Sam. I'll be your companion on this journey. I can help you with random jokes, information about countries, cat facts, cute puppies, cute kitties." All right. So really, so the user is presented with this. So let's just run through. Each of them and see what happens when each of these buttons is clicked. So, for example, if the user says, "Okay, random jokes," and okay, so this is the jokes are kind of techy anyway. A SQL statement walks into a bar and sees two tables. It approaches and asks, "May I join you?" Well, I know someone who writes SQL is going to understand that joke. Then the bot asks, "One more? Do you want one more?" If you say yes, then it goes ahead and it fetches another joke. "To whoever stole my copy of Microsoft Office, I will find you. You have my word." So still another tech joke. And you could just go on and on and on and on. So for example, the person on the journey could just keep on getting jokes supplied to him. Then maybe you're tired of this and you just say no. Then the bot asks, "Can you provide your contact information. So because they would also, part of the reason why they are creating that application also is they really want to be able to get information about people who engage with the platform and stuff like that. This also can be extended to include feedback. So a person could provide feedback on his journey on things like that. So do you want to do that? If it says yes, it's just going to ask. And okay, now I want us to note this because I'm going to come into it in the chat. So now you can see here, it says, what is your name? Now, if you observe, as I was clicking on all this button, texts were being typed. So that just shows that you don't necessarily have to click on the button. You can also type. So, so that's why you can see it is engineered that once you click on the button, it does the typing for you, but you can also type these responses. So now I want us to observe something in this now. It says, what is your name? Rather than just go ahead and say Kayode, I'm just going to say, my name is Kayode. So we'll observe what's going to happen later. So it says, what's your phone number? Let me just say 09033811665. Okay. Then, what's your email address? Let me just say at yahoo.com. And okay, so it just tells you. So now this is memory. This is what I told you about memory. And now you can see this information has been persisted. And you can see rather than save my name as my name is Kayode, I was able to extract the actual name from that, and that is Louis. That's language understanding. So if it was just a hard-coded thing, if it was hard-coded, it would take that whole line of statement as my name, but the AI component is really able to extract my name, and we could also use that for the phone number. So rather than just providing the phone number alone, it could be in a text. And it can also be designed in a way that you don't even have to type them out separately. You can type it together. You could just say, my name is Kayode, my email is this, and my phone number is this, and all of these things are automatically extracted. So that is Louis in action. So that's the random jokes component. Information about countries. So if you click on that, it's just going to go and say, okay, enter the country name. So let's say Kenya. Then it's just going to pull information concerning the country. Okay, there's something broken there. So then the cat facts, once you click on that, do you know, this is a test. So it says, do you know hearing is the strongest of cat senses? They can hear as much as a high as 64 kilohertz. Okay, let's hear one more cat fact. Do you know adult cats can only meow to communicate with humans? Okay, I'm tired. Let's move to the next thing. No, I'm not providing my contact information. And we're back here. Cute puppies. Now, another aspect of bot design is navigation. If you observe, the navigation is the navigation is flowing into each other. You can see when we are done, we are able to come back to the beginning and we are able to start. So depending on how you want the conversation to flow, it's always good to make your navigation experience easy. So this one is just the dog, the cute puppies, is just showing you images of puppies. Now, all of this, where is the data coming from? It's coming from publicly available APIs. So you can get that using the HTTP function, and you see that in the application. So let's just stop that for now. And similarly, we have the cat pictures. Okay, so it just shows random cat images, and those are the functions. So let's just go into how this is put together. And remember, I said that as much as there's a lot of clicking, and that's still an element of the user experience, because if you're leaving the user to type in alone, you are taking away some, you're making it more difficult to use. So that's why we have this structure. Now, if you remember, I talked about adaptive cards. Now, this, what you can see here, this card here is an adaptive card. Now, you can see, even though it is within a chat, this is not an application. And believe me, you can take this program and embed it in Facebook chats, for example. You can embed it in a Facebook channel. And even within that chat, you can actually click these buttons. You can actually do all of this stuff. So adaptive cards really allows you to sort of render an application UI within another application. So for example, you could create a program that other people can use. But for them to use it, they don't necessarily need to do a lot of complex things. They just need to implement your adaptive card, and they don't have to bother about the styling. They don't have to do all of those things. The adaptive card will automatically adjust to the host environment. So now that we've seen the bot, let's go to the back end and see how it comes together. All right. So remember, we were here the last time, and I talked about dialogues, and now for you to create a new dialogue, you come over here, this place, you say add a dialogue. So, and dialogue really holds a unit of the conversation. So it holds a unit of the conversation, like more like a sequence of actions that you want to be performed. So that's what a dialogue is. Then another component, as we saw last week also, was trigger. And trigger is really what allows you to switch in between dialogue, to switch in between actions and the likes. So a trigger listens to the user input. It listens to the user input, and based on what is being passed, is able to adjust to, is able to make decisions based on how you have put it to be. So now let's just run through. First off, let's run through the triggers. Then we're going to run through the dialogues. So now, starting from the greeting trigger, if you remember from last week, once you create a new instance, the greeting trigger is provided for you by default. And now this is just the flow. This just checks all the people in the chat, and this is really what we are concerned with. Send a response, and this response is the welcome card. That's the adaptive card that we are being presented with. So let me talk a little bit about language generation, right? I expressed that language generation is what determines the response, the structure of the response that the bot gives. So the bot is able to present us with that welcoming card because we have provided it here. Now, but you will observe, you can see a $sign, you can see a curly brace, then you can see a function, kind of, then a close curly brace. So that's a syntax for accessing variables within language generation. If you want to learn more about language generation, you can do a Google search for loop down. You can do a Google search for loop down, which is the more like the programming language that is used in language generation. If I'm to just spell it, let me just say LUDOWN. So you can look into loop down. That's the programming language for language generation. So you can't really say it's a programming language anyway, because it's more like structuring, right? You can compare it with XML or JSON. Okay, so in loop down, we use a dash. Then when you type, you use that to provide a new statement. And for a comment, hash is a comment in loop down. This is not a loop down class anyway, but that's how you pass comments in loop down. And okay, so here, this is the language generation aspect here, language generation. Then if you remember, there's this part called bot responses. So because I want us to be able to see the code that makes the adaptive card come to life, and you are able to see that under bot responses, and we are going to get to that. So that's the greeting. That's all for the greeting. Then after it presents us with this welcome card, as we can see, that is the end of that part. So when we come to random jokes trigger, if you remember, the first place in our application here is a random jokes button. So we have it here. So it says begin a new dialogue, random jokes dialogue. So what are we saying? When you get the trigger for random jokes, begin this dialogue. After you do that, begin a dialogue for get user info. Because if you remember from the demo I did just now, after it says the joke and you click on no, it asks for your information. So this is the part that brings that prompt. Then after it asks for your information, then it sends the welcome back for you to be able to start again. So this is good navigation. Okay, so now if we say, so we'll still look into the random jokes dialogue. We have it here on the dialogue part. But let's still talk about the trigger. Now, there are two types of, so there's this concept called recognizers. And you observe that when you are creating a new trigger, it says add a new trigger, okay? Or when you are creating a new dialogue, so let me just say new dialogue. So there's a concept of recognizers, and I'm going to explain the difference between two recognizers. Now you can see recognizer type. So that recognizer is the language understanding component. You know, I've mentioned language generation, which is the lowdown. Now, language understanding is that's where the recognizer comes in. And we have default recognizer. Now, this default recognizer uses Lewis. It uses Lewis. So, and that brings all the full capabilities of AI into the application. All right. And but regular expression recognizer is more like a matching recognizer. If you remember, when you are interacting with some bots, they give you some commands and you say, and they tell you more like an instruction, and they say these are the commands that you should type. You might observe, if they are not using AI, you will observe that if you don't type those commands, if you don't type it as it has been specified, you will observe that there is no allowance. You will just discover that the application tells you it doesn't recognize what you have entered. So that kind of experience is gotten by using the regular expression recognizer, because what that does is that just does like a direct match of whatever is entered with whatever you've stored internally. So hopefully we'll look into that more in-depthly, but I just want to express that difference. But when you are using default recognizer, you are bringing the capabilities of AI into your application. So let's just go back to the random jokes trigger. So that's what is over here. And so when you are using the default recognizer, you will now get to see this. Now you can see here, it says trigger phrase intent. Okay, I told you I always like to hover. Okay, this is just the name of the intent. But now this is also lowdown. This is lowdown. It's also language, is more language understanding. Now, if you observe this, it says random jokes. So this means if I type random jokes, it will be triggered. But if you remember, I said this is a default recognizer, because if we come to the parent, you will see it here, recognizer type, default recognizer. Hopefully, if we have time, I will change it before the end of the session and we'll actually see the difference in terms of the explanation I just gave. But here you can see we can actually type multiple trigger phrases. So you could just say, tell me a joke. So rather than clicking the button, the user could just type, tell me a joke. And this intent is triggered. This random jokes trigger is triggered. If you say, tell me a joke, you could say, I'm bored. Okay, so you could add the possible key phrases. And the good thing about using language understanding, because this is Lewis, you might be wondering that, but language understanding is accessed through a website. But I just want you to know that you don't necessarily have to do it from the website. You can actually do it through code, and this is how the code looks like. So rather than do it on the website, it is inbuilt with Bot Framework Composer, so you don't have to go to different services before you can get your bot engineered. So these are the example trigger phrases. Okay, so we can just have that like that. And so if the user types any of this, it's going to trigger. And the good thing about using LUIS, language understanding, is that the user doesn't have to type this exactly, as I would love to show us when we're doing the next demo. The user doesn't have to type this exactly. The AI component really makes it flexible. So it just does a rating based on all of what you already have, and it decides which intent is triggered, and you can add the example phrases here. And if you are using a default recognize, if you are using a regular expression recognizer, you will have something different. Let me just show us now, because our time is also fast spent. So let me just switch this new one I created. Let me just switch it to a regular expression recognizer, and you will observe for the okay, so let's add a new trigger. Let's just okay, so now you can see input regex pattern. So this pattern is what is going to be matched. So let's just say match me. Okay, we are not going to push this further, but I just wanted us to see that you could add the trigger phrase. So in comparison to using the default recognizer, now you can see we could just pass this trigger phrase, and it is when it sees this trigger phrase as it has been typed that is going to recognize it. So that's the difference between the two. So, but there are some cases you will want to use the regular expressions, because once you use the default recognizer, it does a call to LUIS. So that doesn't provide an immediate response, because it has to talk to LUIS over the internet to get your response. So that's just that. All right, so running through the orders, they are all similar to these random jokes. If we come to cat facts, you can see begin a new dialogue, cat facts dialogue, get user info, then after that show the welcome card, and that's consistent for all the rest of those buttons you can see. Okay, now we have the cancel, which wasn't really explored in this application, but the cancel trigger is just what can actually allow the user to cancel the conversation flow at any point, and just kind of restart. So you can see cancel all active dialogues and present the welcome screen again. And the unrecognized, now it's always good for you to have unrecognized, and unrecognized just means when the application is not able to determine a valid trigger, when there's no trigger that corresponds to what the user has entered, this unrecognized action is thrown, and it just says, I can't process that, please submit a feedback or suggestion. So those are, and it's always good to add nothing, just to add something random and unrelated to the topic. And generally they say that the amount of example statements you put here, you can also try to replicate that in the amount for the unrecognized triggers, even though it doesn't really matter, but it's something that generally is said that it's a good idea. Okay, so that's about the triggers, and we've been able to see how it is triggered. So for example, cute puppies, we have just cute puppies, but you can also add more. You could just say, show me some puppies. So now you can see there's an error. That's because I didn't put a dash before. So when you are typing a new statement, you put dash. And generally, that's what you'll be using a lot. It goes deeper. You could have if else. You could have other complex logic functions in this place, just for you to be able to control what the bot says and really make it more human and all of that. But this is what we are working on right now. So same thing for this. We have cute kitties, we have cats, and all of that. So when it recognizes those triggers, it performs this action that we have put in the flow. So let's coming into these random jokes, which is still kind of consistent across the rest of them. This structure is consistent across the other ones. And for these random jokes here, you can see it starts with an HTTP request. So we are running a GET request, and this is just a publicly available API for you to be able to get jokes. If I just copy that and maybe paste it in my browser, you will see that every time I refresh, I'm able to get a random joke. So now you can see this is a random joke. If I refresh, another random joke. So this is the API that it's connected to under the hood. So, and depending on your application within your company, you could actually have an API that you can connect to and get those functionalities within the bot also. Now that we are here, I want to show us the designer for adaptive cards. So if you come to adaptivecards.io, okay, so there's a designer. Unfortunately, the one I use for the bot is not actually saved here, but this is really a designer where you can come to. So this is just a drag and drop. So when you see an adaptive card, it's not a technical tool. This is an example of an adaptive card, and this is the code that makes it happen. So it's just JSON, you describing the structure, and internally it is rendered as this. Then now you can see this is bot framework web chat. If we change the host, now these are different hosts that support adaptive cards. So if you say Microsoft Teams, you can see that same content. You can see it is rendered differently when it is in Microsoft Teams, and depending on where it is, if it is in the light mode, you can see it's rendered different. So I just wanted to tell us that about adaptive cards. So coming back here, wow, the time is fast spent already. Okay. So that's just what goes on here, and now you can see send a response. If you remember last week, I showed us the different actions you can perform within your flow. You can send a response, you can ask a question, confirmation. So for example, when I was asking that, there was a place that I asked, okay, one more, do you want more? So that is a confirmation prompt. For me to get that, I just went ahead and under ask a question, that was confirmation. So once you click on that, okay, let me not do that. Let me just show us what is configured here. So once you use this ask a question node, you get something like this. Something like this pops up. The first one says this is the prompt, then this is the user input. So what's the prompt? One more. That's what we saw in the bot, and the user inputs. And this is really where we can get to solve. Now you can see similarly, you can see expected responses. So you can still have you can do entity extraction. I will quickly show us that now. You can do entity extraction through this, but let me just leave that for now. And now you can see we are able to store whatever the user typed. We're able to store the results. We're able to store it in dialog.oneMore. So this is the memory component I was talking about, property, and generally you see it as property. And internally too, you see there's a node for manage properties. So you can set a property, delete a property, and all of those things. A property is just like a variable, right? So so now we are now able to say based on that, based on the result. So if you observe here, we have a condition which just says we have a condition which says if the dialog.oneMore is true, and you can see here we saved it here as dialog.oneMore. We say if that is true, then do this. If it is true, repeat the dialog. So that's what implements that form of looping action, that if you say yes, it goes ahead and fetches a new image, or it does that action again, or it fetches a new joke. And if no, it just goes ahead and ends the dialog right here. Then if you remember from the random jokes, after that dialog is ended, it comes to the next action, and it begins the get info dialog. So finally, as I'll round up now, finally, let me just show us the entity extraction components that I talked about, and that was used in the name, where we were able to see, okay, over here where it says what is your name. Okay, so if I click on that node, you can see the prompt is what is your name. Then under the user inputs, now you can see something here. Similarly, you can see expected responses. So you can give expected responses. The importance of this is for you to be able to add Lewis components to this question. In other words, when the person gives a response, you don't necessarily have to take what the person types directly. This could be anything. Let's just say Sam, so you don't think it was hard-coded. So it's not hard-coded. We have attribute person name. So now they are custom. So they are, now if I come here and I say art, so for you to be able to access entities, you use the art. So now you can see attribute person name. So within the bot framework, they are attribute entities. So if we are to explore that, and I just say attribute, if I click on attribute here, it's going to come up. You can see this is a list of attribute entities: age, date, dimension, email, geography, all of those stuff. And the whole idea of an entity is the person can type it in a text, but the AI is going to look at what has been typed and is going to extract the entity. So person name is a attribute entity. So I really don't need to have this line. I could just leave it as such, and it recognizes the person name. It's always good to provide different scenarios of what can be typed. And if now there's also another one called ML, machine learned. So that is you saying you want it to listen for an entity. This is unrelated to this node, but if you just say I'm going to Lagos, so we can now say at ML, then we could say at ML city, right? So over here, we are just going to specify, we are just going to specify here, and we are saying, I will just come here and say, you can see it's even bringing the suggestion entity city, right? So city equals Lagos. So what we are doing by typing this like this, or even rather than just say city equals Lagos, we could just say city. We could just specify it like this. So what we are able to do like this is, and you can see we call this a machine learned entity. So that means we are telling Lewis.ai to listen and to actually watch for this entity. So anytime it sees this structure, is able to match and say whatever has been typed in that field, it is a city. So, but that's not corresponding with this particular example. So here, how did we now get it? Right here in the value, we are just able to say at person name. So that just tells Louis that if you find a person name entity in whatever has been typed in the input, pass it as the value of this variable user.name. So that's why you will see later at the end of the day, when we now have this greeting, it says thanks user.name, and from my demo, rather than say text, my name is Kayode, we're able to say thanks Kayode. So using the attribute entity, I was able to extract my name. So I really, those are the components of how the whole thing has been set up. And this is really the end of the session. And as I said the last time, you can always publish. And for you to publish is just as simple as coming over here. It actually takes time, so we won't have that existing. We won't have that here. So, but you could just come over here. Now, this is the bot we are working on. You click on the bot, and it says publish selected bots. So you're just going to click on that. Then it's just going to ask you for the version, and all you will just have to do. Okay, I already logged in before now. So, but if you've not logged in before, what it's just going to do is going to ask you to log in to the account. So that's the Azure portal that you want to publish it to. You will just log into that account, then it's going to publish by itself. Then when you get to the bot service, you are going to see it on the channel. So that's the end of this session, and I hope bringing together what we saw the last time and this, and I want to believe that even if you were not in the last session and you're here now, you still kind of have an idea of how things have been put together. So that's the session for building conversation AI with bot framework composer and language understanding. So while I just hand over to Chisomaga, let me restart the bot and just get the updated changes. So Chisomaga.
Wow, that was amazing. Thank you so much, Kayode, for sharing and explaining this topic to us in detail, particularly principles of bot design, the practical demo on how to use bot framework, adaptive cards, and many more. So we have reached the Q&A session. If you have any questions, kindly signify by using the raised hand feature in the meeting window, and I'll call on you to ask your question, or you can simply type it in the comment section and I'll read it out to our speaker. Oluranti, to answer your question, yes, the recording will be made available on YouTube, and I'll be sharing the link to it in the group chat. Kayode, someone's asking, how can we get to learn more on this bot design? Really interested. That's Oluranti.
Okay, I'm sure that if you're really interested, you could actually talk to the sales department in Ha-Shem, and they can actually get to have a session created for you, more like a one-on-one session, so you can actually dive deeper into the topic, and you can actually get to do all of these things. Then that's a medium I'm going to advise, because having structured learning, a lot of times it saves you a lot of stress on doing a lot of Google search. And once you have an instructor leading you through something, you are able to get it, you get the person's experience. So you're not just getting the knowledge, you're getting the person's experience also, and it saves you a whole lot of time wasted. So that's a good medium. And rather than that, you can also check the docs. Microsoft actually has good docs. Well, the docs around Bots Framework Composer is not wide. I would tell you, you get confused. There is more information on Microsoft Bot Framework in itself than Bot Framework Composer. So, but Bot Framework Composer makes it easier anyway. So that's just what I would advise, either through a structured learning, like an instructor-led learning, or you could just go through the Microsoft Docs.
Okay, thank you, Kayode. Are there any other questions that anyone would like to ask? You can share it in the comment section or use the raised hand feature. We have other comments commending the presentation. In general, people seem to have enjoyed it. So I think we can close. I believe we have now come to the end of the webinar. Thank you all. Okay, somebody just asked, will that be free or paid based on your answer? I guess you can send an email first, and then based on the response, then you find out if it's free or paid. I believe we have now come to the end of the webinar. Thank you all so much for your time. I hope you learned something new today. Today's session will be made available on our YouTube page. Please note that our next Power Platform series will be holding in 2 weeks' time on Thursday, April 8th. And the topic is building travel request apps using SharePoint List, Power Apps, and Power Automate. I hope to see you all there. And also, we appreciate your feedback. So please fill the feedback form, which I have shared in the comments section. Thank you all, and do have a lovely weekend. Thank you, Kayode, once again.
Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone.
All right. Have a lovely weekend. Bye.